Hello again. I'm William T. or Stephen Cleghorn, and I'm here talking to my friend Mick again, the coolest guy in Australia, the coolest progress piper I've ever met, the only progress piper I've ever met, but nonetheless extremely cool. Cool under fire, cool in his thoughts, cool in sharing his ideas, thoughts, and feelings with friends about pipes, pipe tobacco, and all kinds of other subjects. Welcome, Mick. Glad to see you again, brother. Love your haircut. You're looking good.
G'day. What an introduction. You're a very kind man. And, the check's definitely in the mail.
So I'm putting on the hat, kind of imitating the mother of all talk shows. I never wear this jacket. I don't have a chance to like dress up anymore. So I thought maybe when I do these meetings, I'll like put on a jacket, try to look mature, try to look my age. As if
Looking
that
pretty
was
dapper.
hard.
Well, the hat does give it a bit of something, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. So, oh my God. Yeah. So I hate to say it. I wanted to talk to you about this 10 points of, let me share my screen here real quick. Okay. Is it this one? This is the Roger Lawrence one. Anyway, there's a different one here. Let's see here. 10 reasons our civilization will soon collapse. That's a fun one. Really fun read. I posted
Great
that
one.
on Globe Hackers, but it's extremely good. It's very well put together. And there's plenty of really good hyperlinks on it that take you to, sources that you can look into, which I like. And, but, we can't do that because there's another war in the Middle East. So what's going on in Australia? How are people handling this? What's kind of the cultural reaction to this or whatever?
I'd say that generally speaking, the commercial media, which predominantly is, the newspapers are predominantly run by or owned by the Murdoch family, plus some cable news channels here. And then we have some other commercial channels, tend to be pro-Israel in the main. Very, very pro-Israel, and if they were to express any criticism, it's relatively minor criticism, but all in all, pro-Israel. Our Australian Broadcasting Commission Corporation, that's the state-owned media here. I'm observing it to be relatively neutral in its reporting, but a lot of when anything like this happens, whenever a significant event, particularly a war or a warlike situation erupts, as they say, the first casualty is the truth. And news media, being all of them wanting to be first with the news rather than the most accurate, do tend to broadcast those initial stories that come out, talks about beheadings, talk about rape and murder and all sorts of things. And that's not to say, from my point of view, that I'm disputing any of those sorts of stories. It's just that gets it was very much Israel was reported as the victim in this immediately. And I suppose when you think about it, they've been invaded and they've been attacked. So that stands to reason. But with that comes a tendency to really pile it on. And so to try to understand just how grotesque this is difficult. All such activities are grotesque and are abominations, but it's hard to get perspective, I suppose, is what I'm saying, to find out what's actually happening, to try and understand what sparked this. And we know that this is an ongoing issue, but what sparked it on that day? What's the strategy here? We had a lot of Palestinians and Palestinian supporters literally coming out into the streets, celebrating the invasion of Hamas into Gaza. Many people around the world would have seen footage from the Sydney Opera House where a large crowd congregated to celebrate the invasion and chanting "Gas the Jews, gas the Jews, fuck the Jews," this sort of stuff, which didn't help with to gain any sympathy whatsoever. I'll tell you that. So, whilst I say that our media has generally been pro-Israel, there hasn't been much from the Palestinian side of the story to ingratiate itself into the consciousness of our media and our society. So there's been some very poor behaviour. But we all know historically that Israel has never been proportionate in its response to anything, whether it be a threat or an actual hostile act. And so one can only think that Hamas is almost relying on Israel to do what Israel normally does, and I won't say overreact, but react in an Israeli fashion. You throw a grenade, we'll send a missile, sort of thing. So, which it worries me, because the strategy, what's been in my mind is the strategy could well be that this is not Hamas acting alone, but this is a somewhat calculated and coordinated attack where Hezbollah will now see the opportunity to join, and Israel can find itself fighting on three fronts. And Israel is the most dominant military force in the region, and it's not going to end well for anybody.
Nope. Yeah, I've read all kinds of different things from, I guess they're experts. They've been involved with this subject for decades. And I've heard a lot of things like that. I have heard some people write or say that in actuality, Tehran doesn't want, and I say Tehran because it's governments we're talking about, doesn't want to really go to war because it's so expensive, and they're going to lose the opportunity to get back billions of dollars. The sanctions are crippling. Hezbollah, as strong as it is, and B.J. Campbell said in a recent piece that as far as he knows, only Hamas and Hezbollah can create that kind of damage, as a small militant groups compared to state actors. So what happens is, they're doing their game theory thing, and they think action reaction, the response is going to be like this, and then we're going to get sympathy, and people are going to rally to our cause, and something's going to happen, some desired outcome is going to happen. But it never works that way. Anyone who's really been in the military for a long time know that war is a total, complete, chaotic mess, and you can make all the plans you want, and things will shift and change all the time. It's such a fluid, chaotic situation, even though it seems like, it's not. So best laid plans. Yeah, so people have been saying that it was calculated. We're going to go in there. The best way to get people pissed off is to rape women and kill children and so on. Of course, most of the atrocities, there's never any evidence for it. And if there is evidence on Israeli side, it'll be published and focused on. And if there's any evidence that over the decades that Israel has done similar things, and they have over and over again, there are just lies. People say it didn't happen, but this happened in the Balkans. This happened, Bosnia, Serbia. This happened. Every genocide is like that. So that book I'm reading, which is A Problem from Hell, it's so bloody interesting. And I recommend anybody who wants to read an interesting book. But it just gives you the idea that, these are powerful governments, state actors, politicians, players who have their desires and goals, and they're playing the game, and it's a messy game, and it kills innocent people. And generally, the big players like the United States, the US backs Israel to the hilt, always. So if Israel didn't have powerful allies like European countries and the United States, it couldn't do what it's doing. It wouldn't exist. And Israel knows that. So they are surrounded by, threats, always have been. But then the history of Israel is messy. It involves imperialism and colonialism and all kinds of bizarre stuff. And that's a lot to take on if you want to study it, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, just on that, it's I can speak from personal experience of apathy, only knowing a very very small understanding of how Israel was formed and when it was formed and all that. And I think most people go through life with that sort of doesn't affect me, so I don't need to know sort of mentality, and that's fine. But when one does actually try to study the history of how Israel came to be, and it goes right back to the late 19th century, and deals done during World War One, that sort of thing. And it's if you go back and look at the history of how it was formed, you can fully, oh, here he goes. You can fully understand the grievance from the Palestinians. And unfortunately, when we look back in activities of the last 25 years, I don't think we have learnt our, we haven't learnt the lessons from history. But Israel was formed, and there's been occupations. It was colonialism, and the Palestinians didn't have much of a say in the Jews having Israel. But it has blown out of all proportion since the 1950s. The extreme,
the 67 thing or whatever. I'm like you.
Yeah,
I don't know everything in detail, but the history and all that. But some historians say history is now and history is the future, because somehow, in a way, we have agency, perhaps, depending on how powerful we are and how many resources we have and what we know and think. And so maybe if we're aware of certain things, we can make decisions that can influence something in some small way. But obviously, there's this ideology, there are many good reasons why the United States wants Israel to be, a kind of a military base and a powerful land-based aircraft carrier with nuclear weapons and so on in the region, because of the energy that we need in civilization to do anything. And that's just a fact. You know, it's not
Mm.
real politic or anything. It
But
just is
but
what it is. And
it's also local politics. America has a very large, powerful, and influential Jewish population,
yeah, but a lot
and
of these people, you know, I don't want to bandy about secular or Orthodox or Ashkenazi or anything like that. But a lot of secular Jews and Jewish people, practicing Jewish people and so on, they want a one-state solution, or some of them want a two-state solution. They have for a long, long time, and they've never countenanced or approved of the kind of murder that happens in
no,
Palestine. And you can call it murder whether you want to be
mm,
wishy-washy or middle of the road about it, or keep your job. Since we don't have jobs in the media, we don't. It doesn't matter what we say, but um, there's tons of people in the States. You know, the idea that everyone in the States or in the diaspora in Australia or Europe, every Jewish person is a hardcore Zionist that wants a greater Israel, which means parts of Syria, parts of Iraq, parts of Jordan, parts of Egypt, and so on and so forth. Really
mm,
redraw the borders. And of course, that's an intense ideology, and these things are very stubborn and deep. You know, once you
mm,
believe something, and you can find any kind of justifications for it, like in the Bible, why do they justify slavery? You can talk yourself in circles about those passages. They didn't
mm.
really mean slavery like antebellum South or something. It's a different kind of slavery. It's a kinder, gentler, more traditional slavery or whatever,
Indentured servitude. Yes.
or whatever they
Yeah.
say. But the point is, you can rationalize these things. You can come up with logic and good reasons, logical
Yeah.
reasons why there should be a greater Israel. And you can go back thousands of years in history. You know, and you can throw a dart at a timeline, and then you can analyze it, like you said, the end
Mm,
of the 19th century or World War I or whatever. And but the point is, you know, if people were more aware of the context and everything, you know,
mm,
maybe we could find a way to talk to one another and figure out a different course rather than repeating the same thing over and over again ad nauseum, and all these innocent people get killed, and therefore
yeah.
the grace of God go I. You know, it's like
Yeah.
we're just lucky we weren't born in Yemen, you know.
And that's where it's become so murky that the history of it is has been lost in the whole behaviour of both sides. Like I said, the atrocities of Palestinians, the atrocities of the Jews, and I'm talking about governments here. I'm not talking about necessarily individuals. But the tactics used by both sides in this 50, 60-year
Yeah,
war,
right.
this guerrilla war that's been going on. Um,
It's all terrorism.
it is, and one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, but they're on both sides, both. So, look, Palestine, Hamas shielding itself using human shields to send rockets into Israel are only asking for a response from Israel that's going to affect innocent players, innocent people. And that sort of thing it's become a war for the sake of war. I don't even know if these people really understand what they're fighting for anymore. I think the religious aspect of it, I think religion is more of a weapon a society uses in order to get its people motivated with the promise of an afterlife if they give up their life for their country in this one. I don't think it's religious based as in God told me to do this. I think it's more of that religion in this aspect is used as a means of control.
It's always peripheral because it's really powerful interests at the heart of it. You know, the king
Exactly.
wants something, the capitalist wants to take something. So you
Mm.
go to North America and you say, I gave that guy seashells for Manhattan, and the chief said it was okay. And he took his seashells and he left. And we spit on our hand and we shook on it. And then we wrote up a contract that the chief can't read it, but that was a legal precedent for what we had to do from my side anyway. We took over Manhattan, and then some of these crazy people in the tribe didn't want to leave their homes and their hunting grounds. I mean, I said, I made a deal with your chief. And they were intransigent. So we brought up the boats and the cannons and the soldiers, and we just had to wipe them out. And you got to get them way the hell off the land so they can never come back, kind of thing. And now we have, New Amsterdam, New York City, and religion, it's like, yeah, there are places where religion is the thing. You have these wars in Europe that were ostensibly about religion, and in England, Protestants and Catholics, and uh, what was it, Mary of Scots or whatever it is, things like that. The 30 Years' War, whatever. But generally, it's about, it was about kingdoms and powerful families wanting things to control things, the land and whatnot. And now it's about capitalists wanting to control things. So, yeah, I wouldn't even bother talking about the religious side of it because it's such a different game nowadays.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, religion is used as a tool to get the masses to mobilize. I don't think it's at the real heart of what we're talking about here. And it is, and I can see why Palestinians would feel aggrieved by decisions made about their land that they weren't consulted, they weren't a party to it. And the Jews were given a promised land, and they moved there believing that
That's a
it was
crazy
righteous.
thing too, though, because it's like the Jewish diaspora. A lot of Jewish people think that Jews should be all over the world just being themselves.
Mm.
And not everyone's a Zionist or a hardcore Zionist. But the
Yeah,
thing is, people say, well, look, if you don't get out of here, we're going to burn you and kill you in gas chambers and incinerate you, or pogroms. We're going to vandalize your spaces and kill and rape your women and so on. And then suddenly the imperial and colonial powers of the day get an idea with some Jewish leaders that, hey, we got an idea, we'll just put you in Uganda. There was a time when Uganda was thought of as a place to
yeah,
put the Jewish state. And no, let's go back to the traditional area or traditional lands from biblical times and whatever. And there have always been Jewish refugees around the Middle East and Palestinian refugees around the Middle East for centuries. So
yeah.
it's like, it's kind of racist to me to think that, like, oh yeah, let's get on board with that. We're totally into that. Let's put all the Jews on this piece of land in the Middle East. And then
Mm.
the whole thing is predicated on war and violence. That's what I'm trying to say. It's so convenient for the powers that be in the great game, the players, that you have this constant tension because it justifies their business interests all the way. And all of us, plebs and proles and consumers, we're just witnesses. We just watch the show and get outraged and parrot the media. So sometimes I think that people are happier if they're just CNN people or MSNBC people or Murdoch people or New York Times people. They don't have to think much. They're told what to think, and
Well,
they
now, ever since the first Iraq invasion, I suppose this even maybe goes back to the Vietnam War, where we have media embedded with the military. And so it's almost a bizarre, macabre junket that journalists can get on if they write the right pieces, if they spin the right angle, they can get embedded, they can get in, and because I suppose for many journalists who are actually passionate about what they do, one of the frustrations about war is that it's very hard to get to the truth. It's very hard to get the information, and it's very hard to report on. So you need to get embedded, and you need to get access. And the war machine has this deal with the media. We can give you access, our type
Yeah,
of
but that's
access,
all
obviously.
contrived. That's part of the big business. You know, the
Yeah.
media embedded is just a propaganda angle. That's just to control the information, the outflow of information from the fluid, foggy battlefield, and create a story, a narrative that makes sense, that can keep people from causing any trouble or getting unruly. You've got to constantly fear the masses, like Nixon's worried about, you know, talking to Kissinger. We got to bring in all the school buses and surround the White House because the Black Panthers are going to come and eat us alive, you know, kind of thing. But this whole embedded thing, like you say, that started in Iraq, the first war, wasn't it? It's like,
Yeah,
it's so clever.
that's when we first. I think it started in Vietnam as well, but I think we saw it most in the Iraq wars.
Right, Vietnam was the first real TV war.
Mm.
I mean, Korea, there was a lot more media, obviously, but you know, that's part of the thing. You need the propaganda to keep the momentum for the war. And nowadays, it's fourth generation kind of warfare. War is terror, period. And let me just real quickly go to this BJ Campbell thing, this hand waving freakoutery. I think this is the one. So he's talking about Biden. He was talking about the 10/7/23 Hamas attack is 15/9/11. So he figured he'd do the math. And of course, the best way to do it is to gauge it by ratio. So you take the population of the US at the time of 9/11, and you look at, and you come up, when you do the math, with 1.05 civilians per 100,000 of the population. Israel has 9.3 million population, so it's 14.22 people died per 100K during the terror attack. That's over double the current annual United States homicide rate. So he brought that up. So he wants to correct the math, but then he broadens the whole story by talking about Glenn Greenwald was talking about the January 6th riots. So in that case, it's 0.00121 9/11s or 825th of a 9/11. The Munich Black September thing was 0.012 9/11s. Hezbollah attack on the US Marine barracks in Lebanon was 9.5 9/11s if you're doing the math, the ratios like this. Gaza was blah, blah, blah. But as we go down, you're looking at Afghanistan. So now we start off with the terror, right? The towers come down. It's a horrible, horrible thing. And then all hell breaks loose because nation states get involved. And then the 9/11s go way the heck up, right? So civilian death count of 2 decades occupation of Afghanistan is 110 9/11s, but they were spread out over 2 decades. So more like 5.5 9/11s per year. So Iraq war had something like 195,000 civilian casualties. People say that's a low number, but let's just, for sake of whatever the numbers, that's 645 9/11s, or an amortized 80 9/11s per year. That's just the US, creating ISIS in Iraq, Fallujah, and everywhere else over that 6 or 8 years. We could do, sorry, no. Oh, 10 minutes. Maybe we can start again in 10 minutes. I'm still free. So anyway, so you get the drift, but let me go down here. So, fourth generation warfare, terrorism is war, and war is terrorism. So, there's a huge difference between state terror, and we have to talk about that, and just, some white supremacist group goes into a shopping mall and kills a bunch of people, or what happened in New Zealand, right?
Mm.
And of course, we have to vilify somebody. You can talk about those things, but it's like, let me see this other thing Patrick Lawrence was talking about. Anyway, I'm making a really long video now where I'm juxtaposing kind of a mainstream guy who's walking the fine line to keep, his status. If you're selling books and writing articles for newspapers, you have to be careful what you say. There's a rhetoric around it. There's new speak, right? For example, Gazan children were killed, mysteriously killed somehow, and Israeli children were murdered. So, you have to change the language. So it's a long video, an hour and a half, and I'm still working on it because I'm trying to edit it and layer it so that it's not just boring commentary the whole way through, and it presents a little more information. But yeah, so to sum up, I was kind of teasing you when we were on WhatsApp. War is the thing. It's really the central driver of the great game and the economy and everything, in so many ways. And we wouldn't have the internet without war, because it comes from preparation for war. AI is going to be part of it. The information ecosystem is going to go to hell because of, if we have fake news now, which is just governments lying to us, we're going to have fake news on steroid, where you can manufacture evidence that's ridiculous. Oh no, Israel didn't drop a missile on that hospital. Hamas did it. We have some recordings, and there's a TV series on Netflix about a Mossad agent in Gaza, pretending to be Hamas, and manufacturing evidence. It's ridiculous, and you're told not to believe things, just pure lies. But in the future, the lies are going to be so hard to parse, because you'll be able to manufacture evidence that looks much more real.
It's become I don't know, call me a romantic, but in the old days, you would try to find out who's telling the truth. But now the given is that everyone is lying. And so you rattled off some things there about Israel, but it's just as likely that Hamas did accidentally or intentionally send a missile into a hospital, because once again, they know what the optics would be.
It's suspicious. I'm skeptical, because that's, we're asked to put the yarn on and connect the dots and the conspiracy and whatnot, all the machinations. These super villains, Israel had no idea they were planning this attack at all. It was such a surprise, even though they have spies everywhere and high technology and algorithms. But suddenly they have these recordings, and they've been debunked quite a bit. But who are you going to believe? But the evidence will come out, and they will admit they did it, and by that time it won't matter. It never does.
Exactly, and that's been a playbook for a long time, and you will believe who you want to believe. The evidence that they're manufacturing is not for the independent party to evaluate. The evidence being manufactured on either side is for the tribe. It's for the base. Just like political propaganda, you play to your base.
Right.
and you give the information that you want your base to believe, and you know that they will believe. And Israel, if Israel's manufacturing evidence, it's to keep their allies as allies, and if Palestinians fabricate, or Hamas is fabricating evidence, it's to drum up support from those who already support Hamas and Palestine. So
Yeah, I mean, Israel. I mean, American, opinion, public opinion on this is so important. You got to keep Americans in lockstep behind Israel. And I have nothing against Israel. I've been there. I have Israeli friends, and I have Israeli friends with different political points of view and beliefs. Some are very hardline Zionist, pro-Israel, greater Israel. I had a discussion with a friend of mine in Hong Kong, and he was throwing pebbles at me. He says, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And, well, I'm going to try to stop you from throwing pebbles at me. But, it's like, why are you throwing pebbles at me? Are you insane? Are you mentally dysfunctional, or is it because I bully you every single day and make my dog shit on your front lawn and everything, and you're just sick of it, so you start throwing pebbles? But I don't know. The causes are so complex, and they're webs of causes. They're deep, they're complex, and they're convoluted. And so it's hard to just point your finger at one side and say, it's their fault, period.
Yeah.
But that's what America's doing right now in the media. They're saying every single child, man, woman, and child who dies in Gaza is a Hamas terrorist, and Hamas brought it upon Gaza. It's their fault, so forget about it. And you can see these stories echoed around the world throughout history. The lies are horrific. They never matter when the evidence comes out, because the waters under the bridge were onto other things. People are worried about not having enough money and resources and ammunition to give the Ukrainians now. If something breaks out, a wider war in the Middle East, what are we going to do? Money is not a problem. You have a central bank. You can print as much money as you want in the United States. And materials are the problem. And that's why next time we should talk about these tipping points, why civilization's going down the tubes. You have mineral overshoot, peak oil, you have climate change, you have all these things going on. At some point, they won't be able to build any more F-35s or 32s or whatever.
I think that's important. And that's an important conversation, because it is sort of aligned. And, talking about energy and talking about the myths, it's one thing about that we talk about climate deniers and those who think that climate change is not real. But we have zealots on the other side who believe that electric cars will be the answer to everything, but they're forgetting all the hazards and the issues associated with electric vehicles, such as where are we going to get the materials to make the batteries if everyone was to take up electric vehicles? We haven't got enough materials in the world yet. There's not enough mining going on to get those materials. So, you've got countries saying by 2035 that we will ban internal combustion engines, but the mathematics of it doesn't add up. And but then we have the people who think that you can have your Ford F-350 and you're not doing any damage whatsoever, and it's my right as an American or as an Australian to drive what I want. Those sorts of things, it's in line with what we're saying about this. It's that business machine. It's the propaganda machine.
Well, we got a few seconds now till it's over.
Yeah.
So I hear you. So next time, let's talk about that, shall we? That one article, because it's very, very good, well organized. So cheers, mate. I'll get an actual piece of fire to light this thing.
Sounds good.